Towards the end of its run, The Big Bang Theory was, well, not quite as popular as it once was. I've done a whole video about my problems with The Big Bang Theory already, so I'll spare you those details, but even amongst a lot of the commenters who disagreed with some of what I had to say, a lot of people seem to agree that the show was sort of losing steam towards the end of its run. But the world was shook when CBS announced they were planning a prequel series to The Big Bang Theory named Young Sheldon, which, if the name didn't give it away already, was a deep dive into the life of Jim Parsons' breakout role as Sheldon Cooper. Some people loved the idea and some hated it. Some people just seemed kind of confused. But here's the strange thing. In a lot of ways, Young Sheldon rescued The Big Bang Theory. Again, this isn't a video about what's wrong with The Big Bang Theory. You can go watch that and see where I stand on a lot of issues the show had. Still, a lot of issues people had with the show boiled down to it being a typical comedy series. Is there anything wrong with being stereotypical? Jim Parsons' mantle would beg to differ. Yeah, but the storyline of nerds living socially awkward lives and folding at the sight of attractive women just seemed a bit tired in the television realm, wouldn't you say? Sheldon, though, was a different breed of human, actually. Not only was he super smart, but he was also wildly eccentric, and that made for most of the laughs in the show. Still, many people felt that it was almost too fictional how Sheldon was shown as this on-screen oddity who just couldn't stop obsessing over roommate agreements, bathroom schedules, and relationship terms and conditions. Naturally, they thought Young Sheldon was just going to be an extension of Boy Wonder's life as a misunderstood kid who said a big word here and there and made viewers laugh. Been there, done that, right? See, that's the thing though. Young Sheldon was a lot more than just a deep dive into the life of The Big Bang Theory's breakout character. It was a family-style comedy sprinkled with the right amount of drama to keep viewers engaged. And it's been that way through where we currently are in the series, Season 6. Holy hell, this show has 6 seasons already. Oh, and they actually had the hindsight to ditch the laugh track. A lot of people who hated The Big Bang Theory couldn't get enough of Young Sheldon. To be fair, they claimed that the show not only surprised them in a way they didn't think was possible, but also managed to have them rewatch The Big Bang Theory in a whole new light. So, did Young Sheldon actually manage to save and help reinterpret one of the most popular series of all time? I guess so, and here's how they did it. The Big Bang Theory's breakout character. To say that the CBS sitcom was mostly centered around Jim Parsons' character wouldn't be an exaggeration. Sure, Leonard was there to ground Sheldon, Raj's social awkwardness and Howard's antics provided comedic relief to the show, but the star at the end of the day was always Sheldon Cooper. The show thrived on Parsons acting in a way that had people wondering, what's that wacky guy gonna do next? That obviously got a little tired towards the end of the show. In fact, since introducing female characters into The Big Bang Theory around season 4 and focusing on the love lives of all of the main characters, including Sheldon, fans felt like this show that was originally sold as more of a nerd-centric show had suddenly morphed into a rom-com. Chuck Lorre, the mastermind behind The Big Bang Theory, Young Sheldon, and an absolute ton of other sitcoms tried to save the CBS show as best he could. Fans wanted the show to focus on Sheldon's physics career since that was what he'd been battling about from the very first episode and not so much on Amy. But the deed had been done. The creators had given Sheldon a new storyline and it was hard to just write off a whole character without it breaking the integrity of the plot, if that's what they want to call it. Instead, Chuck decided to circle back to Sheldon's quest of winning a Nobel Prize when he felt like people had enough of his romantic escapades. The younger version of Sheldon is a lot different. Obviously, Chuck learned from his mistakes and also realized it was borderline creepy to give a young boy a romantic storyline for young Sheldon. You could say this was a bit of a do-over for the minds behind The Big Bang Theory, who fumbled big time trying to morph a character viewers loved so much for his oddities into a regular guy. Young Sheldon features the titular Young Sheldon, whose one and only quest is to become the biggest name in physics since Einstein or Newton. I mean, the kid has a picture of Albert Einstein hanging on his bedroom wall, and he talks to the German physicist's picture sometimes, asking for advice. And it's like not even that picture of Einstein with his tongue hanging out. And on the surface, that could be enough. Just play a laugh track in the background and slap on a sitcom title and call it a day. But the moments he talks to the poster of Albert Einstein aren't always meant to be funny. That's another difference between The Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon. A welcome one, actually, and that's the fact that Chuck realized not everything needed to be turned into a joke. The different format. Young Sheldon isn't just about Sheldon. That might sound like a stretch considering it's in the name, but it's about the entire Cooper household and the things they go through, which, in one way or another, circles back to them having to deal with a socially inept genius. A genius who's also just a kid. It's a whole lasagna of character moments. You see, with older Sheldon getting called out for his bathroom schedules, it was funny, and honestly, the viewers thought he had it coming. But with young Sheldon dealing with the consequences of his weirdness and how they impact his family, it's not really a joke. Think about Missy, for example. She was introduced in The Big Bang Theory as the attractive, socially aware twin sister of her odd brother, and everyone laughed at the difference between the two. On Young Sheldon, however, she was the one who always had to deal with the brunt of having a brother who was so different that their parents would usually prioritize his needs over hers. It's not as gloomy as I'm making it sound, obviously. She was tough and resilient and found a way to make a name for herself besides just being Sheldon's twin sister on Young Sheldon. But you have to understand that showing Sheldon as a kid meant highlighting how his family navigated around him, and that wasn't always giggles all the time. Georgie's next. He was the twins' older brother and probably dealt with having the attention shifted from him to his brother when the twins were born. He dealt with it like a champ, working on his truck, finding a few jobs here and there, and dating some of the prettiest girls in town when he wasn't doing the first two. Still, you could see his frustration come out from time to time, and it wasn't always a pretty sight. At the end of the day, both Missy and Georgie would come together to help out their little brother the best way they could. I'll give young Sheldon credit here too, because the episodes always ended with everyone else understanding that they had to be gentle with Sheldon, and him understanding that he needed to see the world that was outside of himself. Since we're already here and talking about Georgie, let's talk about another major storyline in The Big Bang Theory that's pretty much glossed over, but was much better explained in Young Sheldon. Why did the brothers hate each other so much? Probably a major downside of having the sequel come out before the prequel is that a lot of the major storylines are written off without viewers getting a deeper look into what actually happened. When Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory was making a guest list for his wedding, he was reminded that he needed to invite Georgie. The whole first half of that episode focused on Sheldon doing anything and everything he could to avoid seeing Georgie, and the second half focused on the brothers reconciling. Did they talk about what caused the rift between them? Yeah, but only for a minute. Georgie explained that after George Sr., their father, passed away, he was supposed to pick up the pieces with his devastated mother and sister, while Sheldon was off at college. He also explained that everyone tried their best to put up a brave front for Sheldon, because that's just what they'd always done. Still, don't you think that's a very summarized way of explaining why the two brothers didn't communicate with each other for so many years? Georgie and Sheldon went radio silent for all of The Big Bang Theory until that episode. I mean, no one even knew he had a brother. I can't really blame the show's creators a whole lot for this one though. Again, The Big Bang Theory couldn't really expand on this too much because it was a sitcom, and I'm pretty sure the sound effects guy was itching to play the laugh track the second Georgie was done talking. Great. But what about everyone at home who wanted to see more of it? Well, in 2016, CBS announced Young Sheldon, and this had people hoping they'd explain Georgie and Sheldon's relationship, plus a whole lot of others, a lot more than what they'd done in The Big Bang Theory. Georgie's storyline needed more explanation, but Sheldon's whole dynamic with Penny also needed a deeper look. I mean, the guy who couldn't stand certain toppings on his pizza somehow became best friends with his wacky neighbor from across the hall who stood for everything he was against. It didn't really make sense, but I guess everyone just rolled with it because, hey, it was funny. But what if I told you Young Sheldon actually found a way to make this fit very nicely? Penny and Sheldon's relationship mirror. Penny and Sheldon's relationship mirrored another important female relationship. And no, it wasn't with his mom or Mima or whatever. You'd think that a guy who valued his personal space over anything else would be the absolute last person to share a friendship with someone who was always in everyone else's space. And no, I don't mean that figuratively. Peggy was the attractive blonde girl from across the hall introduced in the first episode. She's Leonard's never-dying love and tends to fall in line with the dumb blonde trope. But what was relatively surprising was how her character morphed into a sister-like role, often maternal too, for Sheldon. Penny's whole story arc was limited to her relationship with Leonard for a huge chunk of the first few seasons. Fans love seeing the two in a will they, won't they, and why are they kind of relationship. But you know what they loved even more? Her friendship with Sheldon. From being an extension of Leonard's life that was forced into Sheldon's when the Leonard-Penny relationship was finding its footing, to genuinely becoming Sheldon's major confidant, fans loved seeing the two of them together. But why was it that Sheldon let his guard down so much when it came to Penny? You have to remember there were other female characters on the show, and sure, his relationship with Amy was something else, but he couldn't really be himself with her toward the start either. What was so special about Penny? One half of the Big Bang Theory's audience probably didn't think too far into it. It was a sitcom after all, and they rarely needed a reason to do what they do. Another was waiting for a big dramatic reveal that Sheldon was secretly in love with Penny. I mean, I think it's gross now that I've seen Young Sheldon because it's pretty obvious his relationship with Penny mirrored his relationship with Missy. In many ways, she's just like a young Penny. Ever so adventurous, a social butterfly, and always ready to call out Sheldon on his antics when it looked like no one else would. The Big Bang Theory placed a storyline into the show and expected us to roll with it, and we did. It wasn't until anyone actually started to think, why were they such good friends, that they realized just how odd Sheldon and Penny's friendship actually was. It was one of the Big Bang Theory's biggest kind of plot holes many viewers were too afraid to put too much thought into. They just feared the execs at CBS would turn it into a love triangle or a complicated storyline. Let's just stick to the laughs, guys. Young Sheldon had an entire plot written for it from day one thanks to the many plot holes left from the Big Bang Theory. The show was able to capitalize on Sheldon's many oddities in the prequel series. I'm sure you're all waiting for more information on the weirdest thing older Sheldon did. Well, wait no more. The origins of the roommate agreement. Every major relationship that Sheldon Cooper had on The Big Bang Theory started off with a signature. The very first episode on the CBS sitcom introduced us to a concept we wish we'd come up with, the roommate agreement. It was one of the most hilarious things that Sheldon did. So Sheldon wanted an agreement with Leonard that would cover every base. And truly, the genius physicist made sure he incorporated anything and everything that had to do with living together in that agreement. In later seasons, he even drafted a relationship agreement with Amy. Plus, he worked on a relationship agreement for Leonard and Penny too. The guy loved making contracts and agreements and setting up terms and conditions. It was one of the more endearing things about him. Still, weren't you ever curious as to why he was so meticulous when it came to making lists? The Big Bang Theory wrote it off as just another one of Sheldon's antics. Young Sheldon, on the other hand, gave us the origin story. You might have noticed how older Sheldon talks as little as he can about East Texas. He'll sing like a canary when it comes to the laws of motion in the space-time continuum, but he won't really talk about his college life. Well, as per Young Sheldon's storytelling, we found out that he was miserable at college. Hey, his family might have dealt with him because they loved him, but almost no one at East Texas Tech had it in them to let him go around doing what he wanted. When it came to building his database, that's when they really upped the antics and attempted to stop the boy genius from achieving the greatest feat of his young scientific career. Anyways, contracts and agreements, yes. So, when the administration at East Texas Tech tried to take away his accomplishment on a technicality, young Sheldon realized he needed to be more thorough. Not just more thorough actually, but as thorough as humanly possible. That's why he loves making agreements and why they're always so thorough. He's been burnt once and he's not willing to go through it again. Despite the fact that young Sheldon was handed a television golden goose with a well-established main character, existing plot lines, and a realm audiences wanted to discover, they took their sweet time to ease everyone into one of older Sheldon's wild stories from his time back home. It was a good thing, actually. Young Sheldon took things one step at a time. I'm pretty sure everyone waiting for young Sheldon to make it onto screen knew in their heart of hearts that Sheldon would be skipping a couple of grades and enrolling into college a lot earlier than most people. That was a given, and so were a lot of things older Sheldon mentioned over the course of the Big Bang Theory's run. Like we knew that his parents had their fair share of issues. Okay, so here's where a lot of young Sheldon viewers started scratching their heads because while Mary and George Cooper had their fair share of problems, it seemed like Sheldon had exaggerated a lot of them. For a minute there, many fans believed that Chuck might have broken the canon on his own franchise. Yeah, well, I'm here to tell you he didn't. In fact, he did something people in the television world need to do more of. He took things slow. I mean, not so slow that people started losing interest, but slow enough that it makes sense and that the network makes a buck airing more episodes. So Sheldon's parents seemed like your average Texan couple. Mary was a born-again Christian, and George was oblivious to most things that went on in the house. But that didn't mean he never cared. In fact, just after every major blowout, the two would come together and hash it out, vowing to be better in the future. Sounds like Sheldon Cooper might have misread his parents' relationship, right? Instead, Young Sheldon incorporated just how their relationship started falling apart slowly and gradually. Many viewers thought that Mary's helicopter parenting for Sheldon in particular would be the straw that broke the camel's back, but it ended up being George's affair. Okay, well, it's not as clear-cut as that. It did have something to do with Mary being hyperfixated on her kids and neglecting George, even when it seemed like he was really struggling. But it boils down to Young Sheldon just not being in the same format as its sequel series. Here, the characters actually have more depth to them. Sheldon's not just an obnoxious man-child who thinks the world revolves around him, he's actually a kid who sometimes blames himself for his parents fighting. George wasn't this grouch who never cared like we thought when watching The Big Bang Theory. He had his own struggles too. And of course, there's depth to Mary's character. Mary Cooper. Mary Cooper in The Big Bang Theory did either one of two things: rave about her love of God or battle on about her hate for her dead husband. It was implied that he cheated on her and then left her to raise the family all on her own, which definitely explains some of the hatred. Still, it didn't make sense when fans watched Young Sheldon. Again, while the Cooper parents had their problems, they weren't the worst of the worst, or even slightly in that direction. Let's break away here and talk about Sheldon's number one enemy, God. It's actually really easy to determine why the famed physicist had a complicated relationship with organized religion. He was a man of science and didn't believe in something that wasn't quantifiable. Even a young Sheldon at the start of the prequel series is seen regularly debating with no one else other than Pastor Jeff himself about God. Mary, a born-again Christian, loves the church, to a crazy obsessive extent in the show. From seasons 1 through 6 of Young Sheldon, we see her obsessing over the church and always going out of her way to provide relief for the congregation. It isn't until Pastor Jeff fires her from the church's management in season 6 that she finally seems to ease up. Season 6 shows a new version of Mary, a kind no one really knew existed. She's happier, healthier, and focused on her family a lot more. She even attempts to sort of heal her relationship with George. After withdrawing from everything when she was kicked out of the church, Mary finally seemed happy for the first time in a long time. And then George cheated on her. So that explains why she hates him. But what does that have to do with Sheldon's hatred of religion? Well, technically at the time of writing this, the episode where George actually physically cheats on Mary with her neighbor Brenda hasn't aired yet, but we know it's coming. And it's fair to think this will cause Mary to go back into that spiral she was in at the start of season 6. Judging from how stuck up she is on The Big Bang Theory, it's only fair to assume that she threw herself back into religion and the church to some extent, probably to cope, that it was hard for her to focus on anything else. Sheldon's a misunderstood kid, and he realizes he's going to go through life navigating relationships a lot differently than anyone else. But you know the one relationship he thought he could always count on? His mother. The church, in a way, took that from him. His complicated relationship with his family might be one of the many reasons why he came to see the Pasadena gang as his family. The main characters in The Big Bang Theory versus Young Sheldon. With season 7 still in production, fans of Young Sheldon know that something big is about to happen. Chuck Lorre took his sweet time storytelling why Sheldon is the way he is, and season 6 showed us a side to this character we didn't know existed. In a weird way, it's kind of similar to Better Call Saul. We knew where it was going to end, but the show took its time building out these characters in ways we hadn't previously seen, and slotted in very nicely into the show's universe. Young Sheldon attempted to explain what made Sheldon so, Sheldon-like by going through each and every aspect of his life step by step. His overbearing mother, somewhat absent father, feuding siblings, and a meemaw he could always count on. Season 6, with a much older Sheldon than the kid we saw him as in Season 1, revealed that Sheldon felt neglected by everyone at home as he grew up, and realized that not only did everyone have their own lives to live now, but that his oddities meant that he'd never really find a place for him in their ever-adapting lives. Do you guys remember the last scene from The Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon displays the ultimate act of love by having his Nobel Peace Prize winning speech be about the Pasadena gang and not about himself? While that was a real tearjerker, it did make everyone watching Young Sheldon, which was airing by then, wonder why they didn't invite any of his real family to the event. Again, it's a sitcom, so it didn't need to explain itself. But from watching Young Sheldon, it's obvious there were times when the younger Sheldon realized he was different in a lot of ways from everyone else around him, even his family. It's not like Sheldon didn't love his family any less, but it just showed that he found his chosen family after so many years, one that didn't have to stick by him, but chose to anyways. But anyways, this has been 10K Bill, and thanks for watching. Comment down below what you'd like to see me talk about next. Follow me on Twitter at 10KBill. And of course, make sure you subscribe for all your entertainment-related content.